My parents didn't invite me to Christmas, so I bought my own ranch. When they trespassed with a realtor to sell my land for my sister, they assumed I was alone, never knowing I had a JAG lawyer, cameras, and the sheriff backing me. My own mother tried to steal my land. Not some random stranger, but the woman who raised me. And it wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a cold, calculated betrayal designed to fund my sister's fourth failed business venture. The air in my dimly lit office on base hummed with the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the quiet storm brewing inside me. It was December 10th, and I was hunched over a stack of dry case files when Eleanor's chirpy, paragraph-long text popped up on my phone. She was explaining, so casually, that Christmas this year would be intimate. Just immediate family. I stared at the words, reading them 3, 4, 5 times, waiting for the real meaning to sink in. And then it did. A cold, bitter dread spread through my chest. My mother, my own mother, was excluding me from Christmas. 5 agonizing minutes later, another text arrived. They were planning something special for Chloe. My younger sister, Chloe, was apparently launching her 4th attempt at an organic soap business, and the entire holiday, it seemed, would revolve around celebrating her entrepreneurial spirit. Eleanor hoped I'd understand. Oh, I understood perfectly. A hollow, burning understanding that tasted like ash. I flipped my phone face down, the cheap plastic cool against the anger simmering inside me. I forced myself to focus on the contract dispute in front of me. A young corporal had been shamelessly scammed by a car dealership, and I was building a case to shut them down. This work, this meaningful work, always seemed to matter more to everyone else than I did to my own family. Growing up, I was Rebecca, the responsible one. The one who studied, planned, achieved. Chloe? She got to explore her creativity, change majors 4 times, and cheerfully drop out of 3 different business ventures, all funded without question by my parents. I, on the other hand, worked my way through undergrad on ROTC scholarships, then earned my law degree while actively serving. Every achievement of mine was met with polite acknowledgement, a quiet nod. Chloe's latest whim, however, received enthusiastic investment, endless praise, and a spotlight brighter than any Christmas tree. My phone buzzed again, jolting me. It was Chloe this time, texting about how excited she was for Christmas and then, with breathtaking audacity, asking if I could send her some money as an early present. She needed new equipment for her soap-making venture. The sheer nerve of it ripped a harsh, incredulous laugh from my throat, echoing in my empty office. I didn't respond to either message. Instead, I opened my laptop and began searching for property in Montana. For 8 years, I'd served my country as a JAG officer, 2 deployments, countless late nights defending Marines. For 8 years, I'd been stationed across the country, living in sterile base housing or tiny apartments, saving almost everything I earned. My JAG salary was decent, and combat pay for deployments had added up. I'd invested carefully, lived frugally, and unbeknownst to my family, accumulated a substantial nest egg. They just assumed I was broke, struggling. They never bothered to ask about my finances, so I never bothered to correct their misconceptions. Why would I? They clearly didn't care. The property listings loaded slowly on the notoriously sluggish base internet. I filtered for ranches, acreage over 100 acres, up to $800,000. Montana had always appealed to me. A quiet, almost forgotten dream during the rare moments I allowed myself to think about life after the Corps. Wide open spaces, clear boundaries, a place where hard work meant something tangible. One listing immediately seized my attention, 160 acres in western Montana, complete with a modest 3-bedroom ranch house, a barn, and spectacular mountain views. $675,000. The photo showed weathered fencing, overgrown pastures, and a house that definitely needed work, but clearly had good bones. It had been on the market for 8 months. The seller was motivated. I called the listing agent, a man named Arthur Bennett, right then. He sounded genuinely surprised to hear from someone serious. Most people who inquired, he explained, wanted to lowball or use it as a vacation retreat. I explained I was active-duty military looking for an investment, possibly a future retirement home. Do you want to schedule a viewing? He asked. I'm stationed in North Carolina, I replied. Can you do a video walkthrough? Arthur agreed immediately. We set up a video call for the following afternoon, and he spent 2 glorious hours showing me every inch of the property via his phone. The house, built in 1987, was solid. The roof was only 5 years old. The well produced clean water year-round. The barn needed repairs, but was structurally sound. The owner passed away, Arthur explained, panning across the mountain range. His kids live out of state and just want it sold. They've already dropped the price twice. I made an offer that evening, $650,000 cash, as is 30-day close. Arthur called me back within an hour. The sellers had accepted. My commanding officer approved my leave request for late January without issue. I'd accumulated plenty of leave time and rarely took vacation. The paperwork for the ranch moved forward smoothly. I hired a local attorney in Montana, a sharp woman named Brenda Miller, who came highly recommended and, thankfully, didn't ask any unnecessary questions about my personal life. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Chloe. That Christmas, I spent it alone in my apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and watching old movies. My phone stayed silent. Nobody checked on me. Not one person. The closing happened remotely on January 15th. I signed documents electronically from my office, transferred the funds, and suddenly, incredibly, owned 160 acres of Montana wilderness. Brenda emailed me the deed, and all the keys were shipped to my address. I'd scheduled 2 weeks of leave starting January 25th, enough time to see the property in person and make initial plans. Between the closing and my departure, I threw myself into research. Every evening after work, I studied Montana property laws, water rights, fencing requirements, and livestock management. The base library surprisingly had comprehensive resources on agricultural practices, and I checked out every book they had on ranching in mountain states. My colleagues noticed the change in my demeanor. Captain Camila Rodriguez, who worked in the office next to mine, stopped by one afternoon with coffee. You've been different lately, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Lighter somehow. What's going on? I considered deflecting, but then decided against it. I bought a ranch in Montana. Her eyebrows shot up. You what? 160 acres. Closed 2 weeks ago. Camila, that's incredible. She leaned forward, genuinely excited. What are you going to do with it? Right now? Learn everything I can before I screw it up completely. Long term? Retire there, run cattle, build something that's actually mine. Camila smiled. Your family must be thrilled. The comment hung in the air like a discordant note. I took a long drink of coffee before responding. They don't know. Well, they know I bought it, but they're not thrilled. They think I should have given the money to my sister instead. Are you kidding me? I wish I was. My sister wanted me to fund her 4th business venture. When I bought property instead, they lost their minds. Camila shook her head slowly. Some families can't handle it when you succeed on your own terms. Trust me, I know. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. When I joined the Corps, my mother didn't speak to me for 2 years. How did you deal with it? I asked, needing to know. I stopped trying to make them understand, she said, her voice firm. You can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into. They had a script for my life, and I threw it away. Your family had a script where you fund your sister's dreams. You're writing your own story instead. Her words settled something deep in my chest. It was a permission I hadn't realized I needed. I wasn't wrong for choosing myself. The flight to Missoula felt surreal. I rented a truck at the airport and drove 2 hours into increasingly rural country. The GPS led me down a county highway, then onto a gravel road that climbed into the foothills. Snow covered everything, pristine and undisturbed, except for deer tracks crossing the driveway. The ranch house stood exactly as it had appeared in Arthur's video, siding weathered to a soft gray, a green metal roof, a covered porch spanning the front. A smoke-free chimney pointed at a crystalline blue sky. Mountains rose behind the property like silent, ancient sentinels. I parked in front of the barn and just sat there for several minutes, the engine ticking as it cooled. This was mine. Every fence post, every blade of grass beneath the snow, every inch of the view. Nobody could take this from me. Nobody could decide I wasn't worthy of it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, panic flickered through me, thinking somehow my family had gotten my new contact information. Then I read the message. Major Rebecca. Mark Jensen here, your neighbor to the north. Arthur mentioned you'd be arriving today. If you need anything, we're at 4920 Meadowlark Road. Welcome to the valley. The simple, unexpected kindness of it nearly brought me to tears. I texted back my thanks and stepped out of the truck. The house key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, everything was clean but dated. The previous owner's furniture had been removed, leaving empty rooms with worn hardwood floors and walls that needed fresh paint. The kitchen had oak cabinets and appliances from the 90s. The bathroom featured turquoise tile and a clawfoot tub. The master bedroom faced east toward the sunrise. I spent the first 3 days just walking the property, learning its boundaries, checking fences, exploring the barn. The work was meditative. Physical labor cleared my head in ways that legal briefs never could. I started making lists of improvements needed, prioritizing projects, calculating costs. The barn revealed itself slowly. Built in the 1970s, it had weathered decades of Montana winters with surprising grace. The foundation was solid concrete. The frame, constructed from massive timber beams, would outlast me by generations. I found old tools hanging on rusty nails, a workbench covered in dust, and evidence that the previous owner had kept horses at some point. Standing in the center of the barn, I tried to envision what it could become. A dozen cattle could shelter here during the worst winter storms. I could partition off sections for hay storage, create a workshop area, maybe even install a small office where I could handle ranch business during cold months. The fencing, however, required more immediate attention. I walked every line, notebook in hand, marking sections that needed repair or complete replacement. Some posts had rotted at ground level. Wire sagged in places where years of snow had pushed it down. Gates hung crooked on hinges that squeaked with age. I photographed everything, documenting the current state so I could track improvements over time. Each photo became part of a larger vision I was assembling piece by piece. This wasn't just property. This was a project that would span years, maybe decades. The thought filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time, anticipation for the future. On the 4th day, my phone rang. Eleanor's number appeared on the screen. Before I answered, I walked outside and stood on the porch, looking out at the mountains. I needed to remember where I was, what I had built, before I let her voice back into my life. "Where are you?" She sounded annoyed, rather than concerned. "I've been trying to reach you for days." "I'm in Montana," I said, watching a hawk circle over the western pasture. What are you doing in Montana?" "I bought a ranch." The silence stretched so long I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "You bought a what?" Eleanor's voice had gone shrill. "A ranch? 160 acres. Closed on it 2 weeks ago." "With what money?" "You're in the military. How could you possibly afford property?" I almost laughed. "I've been saving for 8 years, Eleanor. I don't exactly have expensive tastes." "This is ridiculous." I could hear her breathing heavily, working herself into full outrage. "You bought a ranch without even telling us. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I needed somewhere to spend holidays since I'm apparently not immediate family anymore." Another long pause. "You're still upset about Christmas?" Her tone shifted to exasperation. "We explained that we wanted to focus on Chloe this year. She's going through a difficult transition with her business." Her third failed business, I corrected, a sharp edge to my voice. "But sure, that definitely deserves more attention than your daughter who's been serving her country. Don't be dramatic. We can celebrate with you some other time. Don't bother. I'm good here." I ended the call and turned off my phone. The silence that followed was glorious. The rest of my leave passed in a blur of planning and small repairs. I hired a local handyman named Harold to help replace some rotted fence posts. He was 72, taciturn, and knew everything about maintaining property in Montana winters. We worked side by side for 3 days, and he taught me more about ranching than I'd learned from a dozen YouTube videos. "You planning to run cattle?" Harold asked as we stretched new wire between posts. "Eventually. Right now, I just want to get the infrastructure solid. He nodded an approving grunt. Too many people rush into livestock before they're ready. Property will tell you when it's time. I returned to North Carolina with a completely different mindset. My apartment felt temporary now, just a place to sleep between shifts. The ranch was real. The ranch was permanent. The ranch was mine. The contrast between my two lives became increasingly stark. At work, I navigated military bureaucracy and legal complexities, helping service members fight against systems designed to grind them down. The work mattered, but it was exhausting in ways I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Every case involved someone else's trauma, someone else's injustice, someone else's fight. The ranch offered something completely different. When I thought about Montana, I pictured fence lines I could repair with my own hands, cattle that would depend on my care, land that would respond directly to my effort. No committees, no chain of command, no endless meetings where nothing got decided. I started counting down to my next visit. I booked a long weekend in April, just enough time to check on the property and continue planning. Improvements. Meanwhile, I researched cattle breeds, studied grazing rotation patterns, and joined online forums where experienced ranchers answered questions from newcomers like me. My family didn't contact me again until March. Chloe called this time. Her voice saccharine sweet. "Hey, Mom told me you bought some land in Montana. That's so cool. Thanks. So, I've been thinking. You know how my soap business isn't really taking off here? I was wondering if maybe I could use part of your ranch to create a retreat center. You know, where people could come make artisanal soaps and reconnect with nature." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear to stare at it in disbelief. "You want to use my ranch for a soap retreat?" "Exactly. It would be perfect. You have all that space just sitting there empty. I could build a studio, maybe some cabins for guests. It would really elevate the brand." "No." "What?" "Why not?" "Because it's my property, Chloe. I bought it for myself. But you're never even there. You're in North Carolina for now. I have plans for that land." She huffed. "You're being really selfish. This is a great opportunity for you, not for me." The answer is no. She hung up without saying goodbye. I added her number to my blocked list. No more second chances. 2 months later, I received orders for a new assignment. I'd be transferring to an administrative role at the Pentagon, effective September 1st. The position came with a promotion to major and would be my final assignment before retirement eligibility. I could do my 20 years, retire at 42, and move to the ranch permanently. Everything was falling into place. The promotion ceremony was small, held in a conference room at the base. My commanding officer pinned on my new rank insignia while a handful of colleagues applauded. Nobody from my family attended. I hadn't told them about it. Afterward, Camila took me out for celebratory drinks at a quiet bar off base. "Major Rebecca," she said, raising her glass. "Has a nice ring to it." "It does," I agreed. "And it's my ticket out. 3 more years, and I can retire to the ranch." "To the ranch." She studied me over the rim of her glass. "You know what I admire about you? You didn't wait for permission to build the life you wanted. You just did it. I'm still figuring out what that life looks like. Maybe that's the point. You get to figure it out as you go instead of following someone else's blueprint." She paused. "Has your family backed off at all?" I shook my head. My sister called last week asking if she could use the ranch for a wellness retreat. When I said no, she told me I was wasting the property's potential. The audacity, Camila scoffed. She genuinely believes she has a right to it. They all do. In their minds, my success exists to fund their dreams. Camila set down her glass with a sharp click. "That's not family. That's exploitation." Her words crystallized something I'd been dancing around for months. My parents and sister didn't love me for me. They loved what they thought they could extract from me. The moment I stopped being useful, I stopped mattering. I made 2 more trips to Montana that summer, each time making improvements and getting to know my neighbors. The nearest ranch was owned by a couple named Mark and Sarah Jensen, both retired from the Forest Service. They welcomed me warmly, offered advice freely, and never asked intrusive questions about my family situation. Our first real conversation happened on my second visit to the ranch in April. I'd been replacing a section of fence near the property line when I heard a truck approaching. Mark climbed out, a thermos in one hand and a toolbox in the other. "Thought you might need an extra pair of hands," he said by way of greeting. We worked together for 3 hours, barely talking except about the task at hand. He showed me how to properly tension barbed wire, set posts at the right depth for Montana's frost heave, and which tools were worth the investment versus which were just expensive garbage. When we finished the section, he poured coffee from his thermos into 2 battered metal cups. "You're doing this right," he said, surveying our work. "Most newcomers try to rush everything, cut corners, end up doing it twice. You're taking your time, learning as you go." "I have time," I replied. "I'm not leaving the military for another 3 years." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "Military, huh? That explains the discipline." "What branch?" "Marine Corps, JAG officer." Sarah was Army Administrative Support, 22 years. "She'll want to meet you properly." That evening, Sarah appeared at my door with a casserole and a genuine smile. We sat on the porch as the sun set, and she asked me questions about my service that showed she actually understood military life. "No, thank you for your service, platitudes, just real conversation between people who'd both worn the uniform." "Mark mentioned you're planning to run cattle eventually," Sarah said. "We've got connections with some good stock suppliers when you're ready. Honest people who won't take advantage of someone new to ranching." The casual offer of help with no expectation of anything in return made my chest ache. This was what community was supposed to feel like. In late August, I had a security system installed, cameras covering the main approaches to the property, motion sensors on the gates, and a direct feed to my phone. The installer, a veteran himself, understood immediately why I wanted comprehensive coverage. "Had problems with trespassers?" he asked while mounting a camera on the barn. "Not yet," I said. "But I'm not around much, and I want to know if anyone shows up uninvited." He nodded. "Smart, especially with vacant property. You'd be surprised how bold people get when they think nobody's watching." The system was more sophisticated than strictly necessary for a rural ranch. I could access live feeds from anywhere, set up motion detection zones, and receive instant alerts. The installer showed me how to save footage to cloud storage, ensuring I'd have evidence if anything happened. "This setup," he said, "will catch everything, day or night, rain or shine. If someone sets foot on your property, you'll know about it." I paid extra for the premium monitoring package. Every dollar spent on security felt like an investment in peace of mind. Mark called me the evening after the installation was complete. "Saw the security company truck at your place today. Everything all right?" "Just being cautious. I'm not around enough to keep proper watch." "Smart thinking. Though, I should mention, we keep an eye on your place anyway. Sarah and I drive past a few times a week. This valley looks after its own." His casual mention of community protection hit me harder than I expected. These people barely knew me, yet they'd already adopted me into their informal network of mutual care. My own family, people who had known me my entire life, couldn't be bothered to include me in Christmas dinner. I flew back to North Carolina, started my new position at the Pentagon, and settled into the demanding routine. The work was intense, but satisfying. I was helping shape military justice policy at the highest levels, making decisions that would affect thousands of service members. The ranch stayed quiet through September and October. The cameras occasionally caught deer, elk, and once, a black bear ambling past the barn. Mark checked on the property weekly, sending me photos and brief updates. Everything remained secure. Then November arrived, and my phone exploded with notifications. The first. Text from Eleanor. "We need to talk about your Montana property." I ignored it. The second was a voicemail from Chloe, crying about how she was going to lose everything if she didn't find investors soon. Her soap business had completely collapsed. She owed money to suppliers, and she desperately needed a fresh start. I deleted it without listening to the whole message. The third was an email from Richard. The first direct communication I'd had from him in over a year. The subject line read, "Family Investment Opportunity." Against my better judgment, I opened it. He had written 3 paragraphs about family loyalty, helping each other succeed, and how my ranch represented and used capital that could benefit everyone. He proposed that I deed half the property to Chloe so she could secure a business loan using the land as collateral. In exchange, the family would include me more in future gatherings. The email was a masterclass in manipulation. Richard had always been good at framing his demands as reasonable requests, at making his selfishness sound like wisdom. Reading his words, I could almost hear his voice, that patient, condescending tone he used when explaining why I was wrong and he was right. But something had shifted in me. The ranch had given me perspective. I'd built something real, something valuable, entirely on my own. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their inclusion in gatherings that would inevitably center on Chloe's latest scheme. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Brenda Miller with a terse note. Please confirm that nobody can claim any interest in my property without my explicit written consent. She responded within an hour. Your property is solely in your name. Nobody can claim ownership, place liens, or use it as collateral without your signature. If anyone attempts to do so, contact me immediately, and we will pursue legal action. I thanked her and archived Richard's email without responding. The pressure increased as Thanksgiving approached. Multiple calls daily from various family members, all with slightly different versions of the same proposal. I should help Chloe. I should think about family. I should stop being selfish with resources I didn't even use. I blocked all their numbers and changed mine, providing the new contact only to my commanding officer and a handful of trusted colleagues. December brought snow to Montana and silence from my family. The cameras showed Mark making his weekly checks, fresh snow covering the driveway between visits, and absolutely no unauthorized activity. I had started planning a Christmas trip to the ranch when the motion alert started. December 18th, 2:47 p.m. Camera 1 activated, showing a silver Lexus SUV pulling up to the locked gate. 3 people got out. Even on the grainy feed, I recognized Eleanor, Richard, and Chloe. The 4th person was unfamiliar, a middle-aged man in a puffy jacket carrying a briefcase. My heart rate spiked immediately. I was in my Pentagon office, surrounded by colleagues going about their normal workday, while my phone showed me a clear violation happening in real time 3,000 miles away. I watched them examine the gate, discuss something I couldn't hear, then return to their vehicle. They sat there for 20 minutes before driving away. My hand shook slightly as I pulled up Brenda Miller's contact information. The violation was minor compared to what would come later, but it established a pattern. They'd found the ranch. They were already plotting something. I immediately called Brenda Miller. I just had unauthorized visitors at my ranch. Family members I've cut contact with, plus an unidentified man. They tried to access the property. Did they breach the gate? No, but I'm concerned about what they're planning. I'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately. Do you have current addresses for them? I provided what I knew. Brenda promised the letters would go out that afternoon via certified mail. The next alert came at 9:23 a.m. on December 20th. Same Lexus, same group. This time they brought bolt cutters. I watched in real time as Richard cut the chain on my gate while the unknown man took photos of the property with a professional camera. They drove through, leaving the gate hanging open, and parked in front of my house. My hands were shaking as I called the local sheriff's office. This is Major Rebecca. I own property at 4782 Meadow Lark Road. I'm currently in Virginia, but my security cameras are showing trespassers on my land right now. They cut my lock and are currently on my property without permission. The dispatcher was incredibly professional. Are they armed? I don't know. I can see 4 people. They appear to be taking photographs and examining the house and barn. We're sending a deputy now. Stay on the line and let me know if the situation changes. I watched the feed while staying on the call. The unknown man was clearly a realtor or appraiser, given how he was measuring distances and taking notes. Eleanor and Chloe were gesturing animatedly at different parts of the property. Richard was filming everything with his phone. They're documenting the property, I told the dispatcher. It looks like they're preparing to list it for sale. Deputy Chris Hayes is 3 minutes out. I watched Deputy Hayes' patrol vehicle appear on camera 1. The trespassers didn't notice immediately. When they finally saw the sheriff's deputy climbing out of his truck, Richard's face went pale. The conversation that followed was inaudible on my security feed, but the body language was clear. Deputy Hayes was taking statements, checking IDs, and not looking sympathetic to whatever explanations were being offered. After 15 minutes, he escorted all 4 of them back to their vehicle and off the property. My phone rang from a Montana number. Major Rebecca, this is Deputy Chris Hayes. I've removed 4 individuals from your property and documented the trespassing incident. They claim to have permission to be there. They absolutely do not. I've had no contact with 3 of them in months, and I've never seen the 4th person before today. He's a realtor from Missoula. Claims your father hired him to appraise the property for sale. My blood pressure spiked. My father has 0 authority to sell my property. I'm the sole owner. They were served cease and desist letters 2 days ago. Good to know. I've issued trespassing warnings to all 4. If they return, they'll be arrested. I recommend you replace your gate lock immediately and consider filing for a restraining order. I'll contact my attorney. Thank you for responding so quickly. No problem. We take property rights seriously around here. I'll increase patrols past your place for the next few weeks. I called Brenda immediately after hanging up with Deputy Hayes. She was furious. They violated the cease and desist before they even received it. That shows intent. We can file for restraining orders and pursue criminal trespassing charges. Do it, I said, my voice cold and steady. All of it. I'll also contact that realtor's broker. What he did was completely unethical. He can't appraise property without owner authorization. The paperwork moved quickly. Within 4 days, Eleanor, Richard, and Chloe had each been served with restraining orders prohibiting them from coming within 500 feet of my property or contacting me directly. The realtor, whose name was Gary Thompson, received a formal complaint filed with the Montana Real Estate Commission. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone again, this time by choice, watching old westerns and planning spring projects for the ranch. The new year arrived quietly. I blocked my family so completely that I had no idea how they were reacting to the restraining orders. I didn't care. The silence was peaceful. Then, on January 8th at 11:34 a.m., my cameras activated again. The same Lexus, but this time with 2 additional vehicles, a white pickup truck and a blue sedan. 8 people total, including my parents, Chloe, Gary Thompson the realtor, and 4 others I didn't recognize. They had professional equipment this time. Surveying tools, a drone, and what appeared to be construction marking flags. I called 911 immediately. This is Major Rebecca. I'm calling about my property at 4782 Meadow Lark Road. The same trespassers who were warned in December are back, and this time they've brought additional people and equipment. They're violating active restraining orders. The response was swift. 2 patrol vehicles this time, including Deputy Hayes and another officer. I watched the entire confrontation via my security feed while on the phone with the dispatcher. This time, arrests were made. Eleanor, Richard, Chloe, and Gary Thompson were all placed in handcuffs and transported to the county jail. The other 4 fled in the blue sedan before deputies could identify them. Deputy Hayes personally called me after securing the scene. Your family is extremely persistent, he said dryly. They had detailed plans to subdivide your property into 5 parcels and list them for sale. My stomach dropped. I felt sick. They were going to fraudulently sell my land. Attempted fraud at minimum. The realtor had prepared listing agreements with forged signatures. We've seized all their documents as evidence. The county attorney wants to speak with you about prosecution. The documents Deputy Hayes sent me later that evening were staggering in their audacity. Gary Thompson had created professional listing packets for 5 separate parcels, each priced between $180,000 and $250,000. The total potential sale price exceeded $1 million. My signature had been forged on seller disclosure forms, authorization to list agreements, and preliminary title documents. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting, getting it close enough that a casual observer might not question it. But more disturbing were the handwritten notes in the margins of several documents, clearly in Richard's handwriting. Chloe gets 40%. Primary investor lists lowest parcels first. Easier sales closed before Rebecca returns from DC. They had planned this for months. While I'd been working at the Pentagon, believing the cease and desist letters had ended the conflict, my family had been orchestrating an elaborate scheme to steal my property and sell it piece by piece. I flew to Montana 3 days later. The county attorney, a sharp woman named Diane Collins, had built an airtight case. The forged signatures on the listing agreements, the violated restraining orders, the documented trespassing, the conspiracy to commit fraud. "This is one of the most brazen attempts at property theft I've seen," Diane said during our meeting. "Your family genuinely believed they could steal your land and sell it before you noticed." "What are they saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That the property rightfully belongs to the family. That you stole money that should have gone to your sister, and that they were just correcting an injustice." She shook her head. "It's delusional." The criminal proceedings took 6 months. Eleanor, Richard, and Chloe all pleaded guilty to reduced charges rather than face trial. Gary Thompson lost his real estate license permanently and faced additional sanctions from the state. The plea hearings were surreal. I attended via video conference, watching my parents and sister stand before a judge in a Montana courtroom while I sat in my Pentagon office 3,000 miles away. Eleanor cried throughout her hearing. Her attorney painted her as a confused woman who'd made a terrible mistake out of desperation to help her struggling daughter. The judge wasn't particularly sympathetic. "Mrs. Eleanor, you violated a restraining order, trespassed on private property, and participated in a conspiracy to commit fraud. These are not the actions of a confused person. These are the actions of someone who believed the law didn't apply to them." Richard maintained his dignity during his hearing, standing ramrod straight as the judge outlined the charges. When given the opportunity to speak, he said only, "I thought I was protecting my family's interests." The judge asked, "By stealing from your daughter?" Richard had no response to that. Chloe's hearing was the hardest to watch. She dissolved into hysterics, claiming I'd ruined her life, that I'd stolen money that should have been hers, that I was a terrible sister. Her attorney had to physically steady her as the judge imposed sentence. Watching them face consequences for their actions should have felt satisfying. Instead, I felt hollow. These people had raised me. I'd loved them once, or thought I had. Seeing them reduced to criminals in a courtroom was a strange kind of grief. Brenda called me after the final hearing concluded. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm not sure. I keep thinking I should feel something more definitive. Satisfaction, maybe, or closure, but mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal. You've been fighting this battle for over a year. Your nervous system needs time to understand it's actually over." "Is it over?" "The legal proceedings are complete. They can't appeal the restraining orders, and their probation conditions specifically prohibit them from contacting you. Unless they violate those terms, you won't hear from them again." After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the late afternoon sun slant through the windows. The Pentagon's massive parking lot stretched out below, filled with cars belonging to people serving their country in countless different ways. I'd served honorably. I'd built something meaningful. I'd protected what was mine. Why did it still hurt? My parents received probation, fines, and were ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees and property damage. Chloe got 60 days in county jail, suspended on condition of 3 years probation. Gary Thompson received a year in county jail and 5 years probation. The civil restraining orders were made permanent. None of them could ever contact me or come near my property again. I retired from the Marine Corps in September, 2 months early under favorable conditions, given the circumstances. My service record was exemplary, my benefits package complete, and my retirement ceremony attended only by colleagues who'd become genuine friends. I moved to the ranch permanently in October. Mark and Sarah helped me get settled, introducing me to other neighbors and local businesses. I started small with 20 head of cattle, learning as I went, making mistakes and fixing them. The ranch became exactly what I needed. A place where hard work produced visible results, where boundaries were respected, where my value wasn't determined by someone else's needs. I never heard from my family again. Sometimes I wondered if they understood what they'd lost. Not the property, but the relationship. They'd chosen to see me as a resource to exploit rather than a person to value. Their choice had ironically freed me completely. On Christmas Eve of my first full year on the ranch, I hosted dinner for Mark, Sarah, and 3 other neighboring families. We ate prime rib from cattle I'd raised, vegetables from Sarah's garden, and pies made from huckleberries we'd picked together that summer. The conversation flowed easily, full of laughter and genuine warmth. Looking around the table at people who'd welcomed me without agenda, who'd helped me build something meaningful, who valued my presence for who I was rather than what I could provide, I felt something I'd never experienced with my biological family. I felt home. The ranch thrived over the following years. I expanded the herd gradually, improved the infrastructure, and built relationships with other ranchers in the area. The work was demanding, but deeply satisfying in ways my legal career had never been. Sometimes, driving home after checking cattle in the far pastures, I'd pause at the top of the hill where the entire property stretched out below. 160 acres of mountains, meadows, and possibility. All mine, protected by clear boundaries and good locks. Nobody could take this from me. Nobody could decide I wasn't worthy of it. I bought myself more than a ranch. I bought myself freedom from people who only loved me when I was useful, peace from expectations I could never meet, and space to build a life on my own terms. The best purchase I ever made wasn't the property itself. It was the boundary that came with it and the courage to enforce that boundary. Absolutely. My family had taught me I was disposable. The ranch had taught me I was whole. And I chose to believe the ranch. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect yourself? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.